over 250 million units sold. The Nokia 1100 remains the best-selling consumer electronics device in history, representing a time when mobile dominance was defined by indestructible physical hardware. By the mid-2000s, 4 out of every 10 mobile phones sold on Earth were made by this one Finnish company. They achieved near-perfect supply chain logistics, allowing them to manufacture hardware with an efficiency no competitor could match. But around 2007, the rules of the industry inverted. Manufacturers were no longer fighting a war of standalone devices. The battleground shifted to interconnected networks of software, applications, and third-party developers, what we now call an ecosystem. Building an indestructible piece of plastic and circuitry no longer guaranteed market share. If the software inside couldn't easily connect users to a broader digital world, the physical hardware was effectively useless. Apple attacked the premium market in 2007. They bypassed the traditional telecom operators who historically dictated what features went into a phone and delivered a device with a massive touch-based screen and a closed operating system optimized specifically for applications. Then came Google. Instead of building their own physical phone, they released Android as an open-source operating system. Because it was free for any manufacturer to use, it immediately gathered a massive base of users, which naturally pulled in thousands of software developers eager to build apps for them. Down at the budget end of the market, chip makers started selling cheap, ready-made hardware templates. Manufacturers in China could buy these templates, install Google's free Android software, and ship millions of inexpensive smartphones faster than the established tech giants could even draft a new product pitch. In roughly 24 months, the market leader was crushed from both sides. Apple stripped away their high-margin premium customers, while a flood of cheap Android devices eroded their volume at the bottom. On paper, a company generating billions in profit and employing massive engineering teams should be able to pivot and build its own software ecosystem. But internally, their reporting structure had knotted into a complex matrix organization. Engineers and designers worked across multiple teams simultaneously, meaning no one had final authority over an end product. Simple software updates required consensus across dozens of departments, trapping employees in endless planning meetings. This chart tracks their R&D budget. Between 2007 and 2010, they poured over 5 billion euros a year into R&D. Yet, as the budget peaked, output slowed to a crawl. Upgrading Symbian became difficult, and new phones took 3 years to reach consumers. The corporate bureaucracy that allowed them to perfectly optimize physical supply chains was far too rigid for the rapid, iterative demands of software development. To solve a software crisis, the board of directors did not elevate a software engineer. Instead, they optimized for standard corporate metrics, hiring an outsider named Stephen Alop as CEO to streamline the business. In early 2011, Alop circulated a company-wide memo detailing a story about a man standing on an offshore oil rig in the North Sea. The rig suddenly erupts in flames. The man has a choice: stand on the platform and burn, or plunge 30 meters into the freezing ocean. Alop told his employees they were standing on a burning platform. The intense heat was coming from Apple capturing the high-paying developers, and Chinese manufacturers using Android to commoditize the low-end market. This internal speech served a calculated strategic function. By explicitly vilifying legacy software, Alop destroyed all internal confidence in the Symbian operating system. He cut off the company's retreat, forcing the board to abandon their in-house software efforts entirely. The memo ignited the platform. They could not rely on systems they spent a decade building, leaving them no choice but to jump from the burning structure and plunge into the freezing, uncertain waters of a third-party partnership. Android was the obvious lifeline, but Google's software is free to use, and they refused to pay a manufacturer to adopt it. Because the board wanted an immediate, massive cash infusion to offset the costs of the transition, they walked away from the most dominant ecosystem in the world. Instead, they turned to Microsoft, adopting the Windows Phone platform in exchange for billions of dollars in financial support. But Windows Phone was a proprietary operating system that required manufacturers to pay strict licensing fees. Telecom operators realized that selling royalty-free Android phones yielded much higher profit margins. Consequently, the operators, who controlled the retail stores and marketing budgets, actively pushed customers away from Windows devices and toward Android. By prioritizing an upfront financial subsidy to solve a short-term cash problem, they anchored themselves to a platform that their essential distribution partners had a direct financial incentive to ignore. Look at the state of the app market in late 2011. This visual represents the massive disparity in available applications. While Apple and Google offered 500,000 apps each, Microsoft's store remained mostly empty. Developers simply had no reason to build tools for a system with a tiny user base. The new devices had excellent cameras and a bright, modern interface, but if consumers couldn't download their preferred maps, social media, or games, the entire user experience collapsed. Beautiful physical design could not compensate for an empty digital ecosystem. Sales dropped sharply, facilities closed, thousands of employees were let go, and market capitalization collapsed from over 100 billion euros down to 15 billion. By early 2014, the handset division was sold off entirely to Microsoft for a fraction of its historical value. In the modern digital economy, mastering the physical manufacturing process is no longer enough. If your internal corporate structure moves too slowly to foster a thriving, interconnected ecosystem, even the most perfect hardware in the world cannot save you from irrelevance.